Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is presented to you by LawSeco. So, today we will be discussing four articles, but two of them have been amalgamated together. The first article is from The Hindu, which is titled as The Structural Fragility of Union Territories. Basically, this talks about that what is the structure of the Union Territories when it has a legislature of its own, like in India's case, we have Puducherry, Delhi, and Jammu and Kashmir. Then the second article is Adultery as Misconduct, which talks about the recent request that the central government has put forward to the Supreme Court to not apply its judgment of decriminalization of adultery on the army personnel. Thirdly, Understanding Conspiracy and Thank You. Both are from the Indian Express, and they discuss about what do we mean by criminal conspiracy, keeping in regard with the recent case of Disha Ravi arrest. And today, I guess we do not have a news and flash column. So, yes. So, if you're also preparing for judicial services examination, you can have a look at the lot of the courses, which is LawSeco's Judiciary Test Prep course. The link to this course is available in the description box below. And from the landing page, you can download free study material for your own help and preparation. Also, if you're preparing for exams like CLAT, All India Bar Exam, or SEBI, then also you can have a look at the lot of the at the courses from LawSeco. And also we have a new course edition, which is Limited Insolvency Examination by IBBI. So if you're preparing for this, then also the link is there in the description box below. So this is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. Mission Indradhanush is associated with, your options are malnutrition, migrant workers, vaccination and immunization, or early childhood care. You can write down your answer in the comment section below. So this is the descriptive question for the day. What is criminal conspiracy under the Indian Penal Code? So with this, let's discuss the first article for the day, which talks about the structural fragility of the Union Territories. So the recent resignations of the Congress MLAs from Puducherry Assembly resulted in the toppling of the Congress government led by Veer Narayana Swamy. As we know that very recently as well, the Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry, who was Miss Kiran Bedi, she had been removed from the post. And after that incident, the various MLAs from the Congress, as we know that there was Congress government in the Union Territory of Puducherry. Now, one thing that we need to understand is in general situations, the Union Territories are under the direct control of the central government. But there are also cases when any of the Union Territories can be given the legislature or the a legislature of its own, a legislative assembly of its own. Now, in that situation, any particular political party forms that particular, the majority of that particular political party forms the legislative assembly, just like in the case of any particular state. So in India, three union territories, earlier we had only Delhi and Puducherry, but after the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019, Jammu and Kashmir has also been made a union territory with legislature of its own. So in such a situation, the Puducherry Union Territory of Puducherry had Congress government in its Puducherry Assembly, but after the resignations of the Congress MLAs from the Puducherry Assembly, it has resulted in the dwindling or the toppling, or we can say imbalance of the Congress government, which was led by Veer Narayana Swamy. With this, it is important for us to understand that what is the structural fragility as to how the very features of the structure of the Union Territory, specifically if we talk about those that have the legislative assembly of their own, is very fragile and is weak in many situations. So this also needs to be kept in mind that which article deals with it. Article 239A. So Article 239A of the Indian Constitution, which was brought, please pardon me, excuse me please, which was brought in 1962, enabled the Parliament to create legislature for Union Territories. So which article of the Indian Constitution enables or empowers the Parliament? And also one thing that we need to keep in mind is that who is empowered to create the legislature for Union Territories? It is the Parliament. So here again, a kind of, a quasi-federal feature of the Indian Constitution is seen. And then the composition of this legislature would be that it can be elected or partly elected or partly nominated. So depending upon the requirement of that particular union territory, the composition of that particular assembly can be either wholly elected, it can be partly elected, or even it can be partly nominated. So there can be council of ministers without a legislature, which is impossible to exist, or both. So basically, there can be a council of ministers without a legislature, but in the technical grounds or in the practical sense, it is impossible to exist. Or even in the both situations, there can be the council of ministers for the aid and advice of the governor or the lieutenant governor. Then, an amendment in Government of Union Territories Act 1963 can provide for more than 50% nominated members. So, even there is a provision that even 50% of the total members of the legislature of the Union Territory can be nominated members, as per if an amendment is brought in the Government of Union Territories Act 1963. So, the Union government is not required to consult the state governments for nominating. Now, here one thing that again shows the unitary feature of our constitution is that the Union government is not required to consult or consider any kind of recommendation from the state government for such nomination, which was, and this was held in the case of K. Lakshmi Narayan versus Union of India in 2019. So, also, it says that the administrator has the right to disagree with the decisions of the Council of Ministers and refer to the President under Section 44 of the 1963 Act. Now, as we know that for the governance and for the complete administration of the Union Territories, the administrators are appointed. Now, these administrators have the, they can completely disagree with the advice of the or the decisions of the Council of Ministers, and he can also refer to the President if at all there is any kind of ambiguity there has risen in the Union Territory or in the administration of the Union Territory. And so if we talk about the resignation of the membership from the legislature of the Union Territories, so the resignation or resigning is every member's right, but it should be voluntary and genuine according to Article 190 of the Constitution. So this is almost same like for the grounds for the resignation from the state legislative assembly or even the parliament, that it is the right of every member of that particular legislature to resign. It is his right, but one thing that has to be kept in mind, that it should be voluntary and genuine. It means it should not be forced or coercive in any manner. Also, it is used as an innovative method to bring down a government without resorting to defection, thereby being disqualified. Now, as we know that under the anti-defection law, there were certain grounds that amounted to defection. Like, for example, if a particular minister or a member did not vote as per the consensus that was taken up in the party, or he was absent when he was required to say something, and similar situations. So here, it is even better manner that they just resign. So resignation definitely is not counted under defection, and that is why they have taken it to be a very innovative ground to save themselves from the defection, and yet the very purpose of making that government fall is achieved. So thus these things are very fragile in the complete structural system of the Union Territories, and thus this many a times causes a lot of problem in the effective and proper administration of the Union Territories. The second article for the day talks about adultery as misconduct. Now, as we know that the Supreme Court in the case of Joseph Shine versus Union of India in 2018 had decriminalized adultery. Now, as per the Indian Penal Code, adultery was never a crime for women per se. But yes, for the men to conduct adultery, it was a criminal offense. But after this landmark judgment of Joseph Shine versus Union of India in 2018, the Supreme Court held that adultery is not a criminal offense, but even for a man now. So now, definitely, if there is a married couple and any one of them conducts adultery, so that particular act of adultery can be taken as a very much valid ground for divorce, but none of them can be, no trial can be brought up against anyone for the criminal charge of adultery, since it has been decriminalized under this case. But the center has filed an application to the Supreme Court requesting it that its judgment should not be allowed or should not be applied on the armed forces. Now, as we know that under Article 141 of the Indian Constitution, the judgments or the whatever contentions are taken up by the Supreme Court, they are equally applicable in the entire territory of India. So thus, keeping that in mind, even this judgment or verdict of the Joseph Shine versus Union of India, where adultery was decriminalized, so that was also applicable to everyone whatsoever. But in such regard, the center has filed an application to the Supreme Court requesting that this judgment, that means decriminalization of adultery, should not be applied to the armed forces. Now, the reason why mainly they have given is that various army personnel, they serve the country and they stay away from their families for months. And in such a situation, if at all they think that if any of their family member, specifically if we talk about their wife, or even if now, since we have women also in the permanent commission of the army, so if their husbands conduct any kind of act of adultery, so now they will be worried about the fact that it is no more a criminal offense, and thus they will not even be able to ask for justice in the courts of law. And that is why for them to perform their duties in the best of their performance, in the best of their might, the offense of adultery should remain to be a criminal one for at least the armed forces. So here it says that if we talk about the code of conduct, so according to All India Services, it requires its members to maintain absolute integrity and devotion to the duty, and to do nothing which is unbecoming of a member of the service. Now here we'll discuss about what do we consider about the unbecoming conduct. And if we talk about the Army Act, it contains the penal provisions for displaying unbecoming conduct or disgraceful conduct. So now what constitutes the unbecoming conduct is nowhere defined per se, leaving ample scope for the employer to use this leverage and set up parameters. Now here in various judgments as well, and through various justices as well, unbecoming conduct has been tried to be explained. So according to Justice Rohinton Nariman, he said that something which is not adultery, because section 497 of IPC will still be unbecoming conduct. So something which you might not consider to be an adultery, an act of adultery under section 497 of the IPC, will still be considered as an unbecoming conduct that is enough to disturb the peace of somebody, a person who is employed in the All India Services or in a similar situation. Then, in the case of Rabindranath Ghosh in 1985, the Calcutta High Court held that married head constable living with another woman was not guilty of misconduct. So, as you can see, there are various contentions, and that is why it is very important that we particularly define unbecoming conduct, because in various situations, unbecoming conduct has been defined in various different kinds of explanations. Then, in the state of UP versus BN Singh in 1989, Allahabad High Court held that for personal morality, it must be shown that this habit has reduced his utility as a public servant. So, we mean that for personal morality, it must be shown that any particular act or any particular habit of that particular person has hampered his personal morality and has also brought down his conduct as a public servant. And then finally, in the case of Mahesh Chand Sharma versus state of Rajasthan in 2019, the Rajasthan High Court upheld that it held that no employer can be allowed to do moral policing on its employees beyond domain of his personal life. So, which means that ultimately there should be some safeguard which is provided by the statutes. Now, in this case, it should be by the Indian Penal Code, so that the personals, the people who are functioning, or are army personnel or the public officers that are working in such domain can work efficiently and they're not disturbed by this particular fact. With this, let's discuss the third article for the day, which talks about the criminal conspiracy. So while granting bail to Disha Ravi, now as we know that the environmentalist and the social activist Disha Ravi has been granted bail. So while granting bail to her, Delhi High Court has rejected Delhi Police's charge that she was a part of the larger conspiracy to incite violence in the National Capital Territory. So now we need to understand that what do we actually mean by the conspiracy. Section 120A of the Indian Penal Code defines conspiracy as an agreement between two or more persons. Please consider this doesn't have to be personas, it has to be persons, to commit a criminal offense which constitutes the offense. So basically, it is an agreement. Like, for example, you and I, and even just not even two of us, or maybe more than two of us, we all come together and we conspire and we commit to a particular criminal offense that we will be conducting this particular thing all together. So that will be considered as the criminal conspiracy under section 120A of the Indian Penal Code. So only an agreement is necessary and sufficient. So proof is largely inferred from the illegal acts or omissions of the persons involved. So it is not something that you have to commit that particular thing as well, and only then it will be understood that you were conspiring a criminal act. Rather, only an agreement to do so is necessary and sufficient. And one's illegal acts or omissions of in particular acts would be enough of a proof to prove that you or any particular person, they were a part of a criminal conspiracy. So commissions of co-accused writings and conversations are pieces of circumstantial evidence. So if we talk about the evidences which are gained from the particular circumstances of a particular incident, so confessions of the co-accused, like if, for example, one particular person says that this person was also involved in this criminal conspiracy, so such confessions, writings, and even conversations which were heard or even recorded by any means, they are pieces of circumstantial evidence. And the law was added in 1913 by British to deal with the rising nationalist sentiment in India. Now, as we know that in the times of 1913, there was a complete, beginning of the Indian national movement that was taking place. And as we know that Mahatma Gandhi had also arrived by this time almost in the country. So the nationalist ideas were propagating, the nationalist sentiments were there all over the country. And that is why it was the British who added this law in the Indian Penal Code to deal with the rising nationalist sentiment, and wherever and whenever they found that people were thinking about, or they were coming together to do anything against the Britishers, so they actually would put the charge of criminal conspiracy against them. The punishment of criminal conspiracy has been given in section 120B. So the punishment for conspiracy is that to commit serious offences that carry a jail term of 2 years or more, including death and life imprisonment, that is punishment as abatement, and to commit offences of jail term less than 2 years, so there will be imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or fine or both. So you can go through this as well. So this is the entire piece of the judgment, and this is from 35 cases in 2016 to 70 cases in 2018. Sedition cases have also doubled in India. So sedition, criminal conspiracy, and UAPA, these are all the things that go hand in hand. And recently, the authorities have been misusing them to a great extent to put down any kinds of voices that are raised against the acts of the government. So this was all for the day. We hope it was a good session for you all. Thank you so much.